Hello, Radio TechCon 2020. I do want to wish you a brilliant conference. My name is Robin Spinks, and I work as Senior Innovation Manager at the Royal National Institute of Blind People. I'd like to talk to you today about innovation and technology from a different perspective. I'd like you to think for a moment about the work that you do, the job that you do, and just how much perhaps you rely on using your eyesight, to do that job. So Rnib is often referred to as the Victorian charity in Silicon Valley, and I want to give you a little bit of an insight into what that's about, what that looks like, and how that has impacted and continues to impact the world around us. So essentially, we're about embracing technological change, and we're about partnering with tech companies and innovators to enable greater inclusion for blind and partially sighted people. We've been doing that since, for 152 years now. I've only been there for 11 of those years, but it's been a fantastic and really interesting place to work, especially for someone like me. I was born blind. I was born with a visual impairment, which effectively means that I am registrable as severely visually impaired. So the vision that I have is entirely normal to me. I can see the top letter of the eye test chart in an optician's office, but I can't read further down than that, even with glasses. I'm wearing glasses right now. Now, all these really do is when I go outdoors, they offer me protection against bright sunlight because I have a condition called albinism, and that makes me photophobic. So when I don't have these glasses on, I'm very sensitive to bright light. When I go outdoors, I put the glasses on, and the glasses darken down, and that really helps me to have a better time and to be more functional when I'm outdoors. Most blind and partially sighted people, however, are older, so they've acquired a visual impairment during their working life or perhaps during retirement. Very often that's the case. And they'll come to think about the world with visual impairment in a different way, perhaps to the way that I do. So our vision is of a world where there are no barriers to people with sight loss, and our purpose is that we're a catalyst for change. And I want to talk to you about some of the projects that I've been involved in that might interest you, where we're changing products, we're changing services, we're making things accessible to people who are visually impaired and to everyone else. And that's the critical thing. If you build an accessible product, it actually will be better for everyone, not just for people who need that accessibility requirement. So we've worked with the Bank of England over the last couple of years, and that's primarily been looking at banknote design. So making the banknotes designed in such a way that they're more accessible for people with a visual impairment. And you might notice if you remove a £10 note or £20 note from your wallet or purse, you might notice tactile features on the banknote. And they've been added to make that banknote more accessible to people who have a visual impairment. And actually, that's a really complex process because accessibility as a consideration has to sit alongside a whole host of other conditions like security and also authentication. So, it's not quite as simple as saying we'll just put tactile marks on. That's been a fantastic project for us to work on. And it's one where we can see a real life difference for people. We've also worked a lot with Samsung. Some of you in the audience might have a Samsung Smart TV at home. If you have, after this session, I'd like you to open up the settings menu and go into accessibility. And I'd like you to look at the features that are in there to help people who are visually impaired and who have other disabilities. Things like zoom magnification, text-to-speech that enables the device to talk to you. That's all built in. You don't need to add it. You don't need to download an additional app. It's actually built in so that if you need an accessibility feature, you can turn it on. And if you don't need that today, who knows? You may be someone who needs that in 5 years' time. And it's great to know that it's built into the technology that you've got. We've also worked a lot with Storm Interface. They're a British company. We've been working with them to design accessible check-in kiosks for airports. Right now, you won't see any of those in the UK because they're not mandated in the UK. But in the US, however, the law insists that check-in kiosks at airports are accessible to blind people, quite rightly. And that collaboration is on display in airports across the US, enabling someone who's blind to go and check in through the kiosk independently. Now, if someone does want to have help or they require it, they should also have that physical personal help. But the key thing is they should have the choice to independently do their own check-in if they want to. We've also worked with Apple. Everyone knows Apple. I'm presenting this to you, recording it on an Apple device. And if you have an iPhone or an iPad or a Mac or an Apple Watch, after the session, I would like you to go into the settings menu, and I'd like you to have a look at settings and accessibility. And again, Rnib's had a long relationship with Apple, where we have essentially advocated for greater accessibility for blind and partially sighted people for many years now, and Apple have progressively implemented features into the operating system. It's not about building apps, it's about building it into the operating system so that everybody who wants to have access to accessibility features has that built into their device. So have a look, settings, accessibility on your Apple device. And also now increasingly on your Google device. We've done a lot of work with Google to build accessibility into the Android platform, similarly making text-to-speech available for someone who is blind. So if I take, for example, my iPad that I've got here, what I can do is I can double tap with 3 fingers anywhere on the screen, and I can make everything on the display larger. I'm just showing you that now. It makes everything, all the app icons, all the settings, makes everything bigger, and it makes it easier for someone like me to see. It makes it possible for me to use a device like this for work, which would otherwise be an impossible thing to do. We've also been working with Lego, and this is around Lego and Braille. A lot of people might know of Braille, and Braille is a language that's been around for a long time, and it enables blind people who've been trained how to read in Braille to access all sorts of communications, everything from bank statements to personal information, and even to information for work. So Braille's a system of 6 dots. Hard copy Braille, as we probably know it, which is the kind of brown paper that Braille is brailled onto, that's fading away, and it's fading away and giving way to a whole new generation of electronic Braille devices. Now, Rnib has been at the forefront of that, leading the development of the Transforming Braille project, which brought together agencies from around the world. And essentially what we did is we made the cost of electronic Braille devices massively cheaper. So by a factor of about 10, cost of an electronic Braille device has gone down now to only a few £100, about £350. If you go back 10 years, it would have been 10 times that. What does it look like? It's probably about twice the size of a large smartphone. Take something like a Samsung Galaxy Ultra, double the thickness of it, and a Braille display, a portable one's about that size. It's very small and pocketable, and it has a row of moving metal pins. Those metal pins are electronically raised and lowered to reflect the letters of the Braille alphabet, and also to reflect the content that appears on the screen of your smartphone or tablet or laptop. So it's truly fantastic. You can be reading using your fingers as someone who is reading visually is using their eyes. And that's really what we want to do, is to give blind people who can read Braille that kind of platform that allows them to have the independence and to be able to access content in the same way that everyone else does. We've also worked with all of the high street banks, Santander, Lloyds, Bank of Scotland, RBS, all of the big names that you can think of, we have been working with, either to make personal banking information available in a format that works for individuals, but also to make sure that banks can adapt to some of the challenges that are coming along, like chip and pin with effectively a flat surface. So we're seeing these kind of flat chip and pin devices appearing in retail outlets across the country. We want to make sure that blind and partially sighted people can use those. So we've been working with designers and developers to ensure that those devices become accessible, and more importantly, stay accessible each time there's a new version. It's not just about making something accessible as a one-off. It's about, what about the version that's coming after that? How do you make that accessible? How do you make the design processes, the considerations, the software development, how do you make all of that continue to be accessible for people? Now, if you're interested, if you're designing an app or a service, there are human interface guidelines that are produced by all the major platforms, by Apple and Google and Microsoft, and you can look at those when you're designing a service to make sure that you design it in a way that's not going to disadvantage blind and partially sighted people. That would be the key thing. I mentioned a number of things that we've done, but we've also worked with, more recently in the last few months, we've worked with Miele, who are a major domestic appliance manufacturer, and we've worked with them to essentially make sure that their devices become more accessible, starting with a washing machine, which has just entered the market in the UK. That's a washing machine that has tactile and audio controls to enable blind people to use it more easily. And it's available from their website, but also from the Rnib shop. And we've been working with that whole industry to really make sure that accessibility becomes a key consideration. Now, when we think about embracing change, we need to think about it in a holistic way, and we need to think about staying positive during times where there's significant change. You know, the pandemic has turned all of our lives upside down, and certainly over much of this year, for blind and partially sighted people, they've often found their world turned upside down by things like directional arrows on floors, in supermarkets, queuing systems, lots of visual information. And you can imagine, can't you, if you go down to your local supermarket, it's quite a different experience during lockdown from how it is typically. A lot more visual content to be taken on board. And we've had to work with retailers and supermarkets to make sure that there are mitigations and there are solutions in place for blind and partially sighted people, including, for example, priority delivery slots that enable blind people to get access to groceries more easily. Because you can imagine, if you're unable to access the supermarket, and at one point social distancing restrictions stopped people from guiding you, it was incredibly difficult just to do something as simple as get food. So we've gone back to basics on some of this stuff, and we've really made sure that we can do as much as possible to remove barriers for people. I want to say a little bit about voice first technology. So people of all ages and capabilities love voice technology. My house has a voice controlled thermostat, voice controlled lighting, doorbell, speakers and music services. And I listen to radio. I'm a massive fan of radio, and I listen to most radio nowadays using smart speakers, whether it's Google Home or the Amazon A-Lady, who I won't say the name of because she's sat right next to me. I use that to access services that deliver radio content. I think radio's got a great future in a world of smart speakers. It's a wonderful medium. You know, radio is magical, and I've not only listened to a lot of radio, I've also presented hospital radio for many years, student radio, and I'm a big fan of listening to all sorts of radio services from all over the world. So it's a great pleasure to be able to tell you guys about the work that I'm doing. So mainstream products that everyone can use, enormous potential to be implemented. Accessibility is everyone's business. It's not just something that is for people who work in the industry. I suggested you could do a bit of homework after the session for follow-up. I think you will love this. You'll love it. So I'd like you to go to Settings and Accessibility in iOS and Android, whatever device you happen to have. And I'd like you to have a look at magnification, talkback, voiceover, the solutions that are there, talkback on Android, voiceover on iOS. I'd also like you to hold down the Windows key on your laptop if you're using a PC, Windows key and plus, and then Windows key and minus, and have a look at what happens to your computer. This is not someone else's business. This is something that's available to all of us, and we should really know about it and tell other people about accessibility and the fact that it's now everywhere. We've just got to leverage it. So smart TV accessibility. If you have a smart TV, I'd like you to go into your settings on your TV and have a look, and I'd like you to see whether there are options there to make your TV more accessible. I want to talk to you today finally about some waves of opportunity that are coming along. So we're seeing artificial intelligence and computer vision are changing the landscape for blind and partially sighted people. So there are services available on Amazon Echo, for example, that will allow for object identification. that will actually allow you to show something to the camera and the camera tell you what it is. There are great apps called Seeing AI, for example, on the Apple platform, made by Microsoft. Yep, it's a sign of the times. Microsoft makes Seeing AI for the Apple platform. That's a brilliant tool that blind people use to help identify everyday objects and to read text as well. So AI and computer vision are making a massive difference. 5G, there's lots of coverage about 5G. I think we're still at the very early stages. We haven't even got ubiquitous, coverage of 4G. But 5G is a great technology with a lot of promise. Once it begins to settle down a little bit and become more popular, it will vastly increase speeds and reduce latency. So we're super excited about the potential of that for a whole range of experiences, not least things like telemedicine, remote health support in an incident situation. So for example, the 5G connected ambulance is a great demonstrator that O2 have been showing people. Just think about the potential to have specialist medical help at a roadside, for example, delivered remotely by 5G. Then think about, driverless cars and the potential to use 5G as an enabler there. But then there's the Internet of Things. I mentioned my thermostat, my bulbs, my doorbells, my speakers, these billions of objects that are all connected, via the internet. It's a fantastic, fantastic future landscape that we're beginning to see unfold. It's not without its challenges. It's all, at the end of the day, about people and technology working together seamlessly to enable good and to enable change and to enable inclusion. People will be important for many, many years to come. Sometimes there's the notion that technology is taking over and will deliver everything for us. It won't. In 10 years' time, empathy will be in short supply. Humans have got a powerful role to play going forward. And we're super excited about the potential for accessibility to deliver all sorts of experiences. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of the conference. Please do the follow-up in the accessibility menus on your devices. You can follow me on Twitter @Robin Spinks, and you can also get in touch with me via the RNIB website. That's rnib.org.uk. Have a great conference, and thank you so much for listening, and all the very best. Bye-bye.